Welcome back. It's time to connect this, which I could probably do without moving my face around so much, but I'm going to do it that way. The slow pokey wireless guys are talking about 6G. Comcast was trying to confuse people with 10G, but today we're having Calix on halfway through the show to tell us about 50G. So that's more G's than even Travis has talked about, I think. We're going to have a fun time today. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. We got our normal guests, and we got our guest from Calix coming on halfway through, Shane Eleniak. Kim McKinley is with TAC Broadband, although I understand that when you moved over, they considered changing it to Tacky Broadband.
I knew it was coming. No, they did not. We're still TAC Broadband, and I'm glad to be here on this Good Friday and talking some broadband. Let's do this, Chris.
Excellent. And I hope you have some friends left at UTOPIA. I put that story in the rundown so we can get the inside scoop maybe of how things are going.
I had lunch with some of them yesterday too. I did. So
excellent. We've got Doug Dawson from CCG Consulting. Welcome back.
Hey, we got to get this show overdone today. I've got some potatoes to die. So yes.
Took me a second, but I figured it out. We got Travis Carter coming in from Minneapolis, where, as I understand it, Travis, you are just working 15 hours a day trying to get new plant in the ground. Is that what's going on?
Well, road restrictions were removed on Wednesday, so season 15 of broadband building has begun. But before I get there, there's two topics. I want to commend Doug on his incredible fashion sense today. And with the black T-shirt, well done. And
it's not entirely black here.
Okay, and Kim muted, and she has her black underneath. And it only took you a few seconds to understand the potatoes being dyed. It might take me the whole show to figure out what you guys are talking about.
So. All right, well, nobody spoil it. Unless you want to spoil it in the chat, that's okay. Also, if people want to go in the chat, Travis has bought a building in St. Paul, and I want to know how much you're hearing from your employees with the ridiculous traffic between Minneapolis and St. Paul that's going to be going on for the next 6 months, where it takes an hour to cross between the cities on 94. It's kind of a disaster.
Yep. Don't plug up the Ford Avenue Bridge, please. We need that for the next few years.
We are going to be talking about we're going to start off talking about Comcast price lock. I want to know if anyone has any thoughts on rip and replace, because I don't. We're going to talk a little bit about UTOPIA Fiber and how they are crushing it since Kim left. We're going to talk about CNET and internet access bills. And I'm hoping if there's enough time, if we don't go long on those other things, I want to just, again, I've mentioned this before, but I feel like we didn't really dig into it. I don't get why WISPs think that changing BEAD is going to be good for them. I think they're going to get crushed under different rules. And so we'll try and fit that in quick before the end of the show. And before we start, I did want to note that Travis has bet. I went back and found the date. So April 9th is 6 weeks from when Travis said that Starship would launch properly, attain orbit, and then return with the heavy booster landing appropriately and Starship landing in the ocean. And I'm just going to keep an eye out for that, because I think this is pretty interesting. So
much more a bigger redesign, I guess, than I was anticipating. But I do believe they have a launch date on the books.
I'd seen that they were still aiming for the end of the month. I wasn't sure if there was a date now. So, yeah. I mean,
yes, and we're still waiting for Jeff Bezos to get his first set of satellites up now.
Kuiper, yeah.
That's now scheduled for the 28th as well. So, yeah.
And people refer to that as Amazon. Is that a Bezos project, or is that an Amazon project and people just conflate them?
Amazon owns it.
Okay. I just want to say, like, I'm following this stuff, and I feel like sometimes Travis might think I'm rooting against SpaceX, but I'm for SpaceX. I'm for Rocket Lab. I think that science is cool and we should move forward. But I also am aware of all the times in which there are financial games that get in the way of science and trying to follow that stuff. Go ahead, Travis.
No, my position has been, and this is what I love most about you, you always take the underdog. So You were the only guy I know that used a Zune to listen to music to.
That was a joke. Let the record show. I've never owned a Zune, although I did have one of the weird little SanDisk players. So pretty cool.
Yep. And a Windows phone. You're the only guy I know that had a Windows phone.
Oh, nope, I'm an Android.
Yeah. Yeah. So you always take the other, the road less traveled.
I'm keeping my eye on Joe's space flight operations company.
I'm actually surprised you're rooting for Kuiper. I thought it would be the ILSR network that's been going up that you've been secretly working on.
I put a little bit of money into Virgin Galactic after they blew up on the launch pad, because I was like, maybe they'll turn it around and I'll get a deal.
So what you're telling me, Chris, is if anything you want to invest in, none of us should invest in at all.
So
is that
here's the thing,
saying?
right? Like, I have a very boring social life. I don't go out to bars. And so every now and then I pick a long shot and I put in about the amount of money people spend in bars over a period of 3 to 6 months or so. So, that's what I do.
No, I'm curious.
You still lose it.
He still loses it. Well, he would have lost it at the bar too. Do you still have a BlackBerry?
Yeah. It sounds like me and slot machines, $20 a year, because I assume that's what and I lose it in less than 20 seconds. So there we go.
So did want to give myself a little bit of promotion. We had a fun interview with Sasha Meinrath on the Community Broadband Bits show this week. That is up there right now, top of the feed. And on Tuesday or Wednesday, if everything goes well, we will have a recorded conversation with Evan Feynman, who left leading the BEAD program in NTIA. And so we're going to record that on Monday and try to get it up right away before the news changes everything that we talk about. So that's on tap. But we want to start with Comcast has introduced a price lock of sorts. There's some fine print. When isn't there? Kim, what are your thoughts on Comcast deciding to lock people's prices?
I think it's just a measure they're doing to compete in the areas where you're seeing all these new entrants enter this marketplace. They want to keep their market share, and they are doing what's necessary to do so. So I actually commend them. I think it's a smart move, and I do think that it could help them, because I think along with that, they were saying unlimited data. They were also saying they were something about the lease fees of the modems. I actually think it's a really good move. And I think, if anything, you're just seeing how companies are willing to pivot in order to keep their market share.
Yeah, I would say that I left primarily because of the cap on bandwidth per month. The modem was very nice. The service was pretty good, as long as I didn't have to deal with Comcast customer service. So, Doug?
And I even think that has gotten a lot better. I think a lot of the old Comcast customer service is not nearly as bad as the reputation. So I actually have had some really good experiences with them. But keep going.
Well, they've raised their rates, I don't know, 12 or 15 years in a row. So, I mean, they're by far the most expensive primary ISP at their list rate. So they really needed to do this. Now, it'll be really curious for folks who don't get on that plan if they still keep seeing the annual increases, because rolling the modem prices in, that I had Comcast before. It happened to pay, their modem is up to $18. That's insane. That should be rolled into the price. I mean, that's an advantage Charter has way over them. So they needed to do something. They're too expensive, so they're going to have to lower. The problem with them is Wall Street judges them by ARPU, average revenue per user, and that's it's going to go down, and so they're going to get nailed for that. But they're going to have more loyal customers. So,
Travis, any thoughts on that?
Well, my non-scientific answer to this, as somebody who has been looking for land in Texas for the last year, every single place I've looked has a fiber option. So my assumption is this could be partially driven by competition, So if you've got a fiber option there, why would you pick the coax option unless they had a shtick like this?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the CNET study on internet access bills is interesting. I think we can jump over to that. And that, to me, they said specifically that they did the survey, 2,500 people, something like that. It wasn't. Let me just say that, if you pay attention to tech stuff, that there's a lot of weird, spammy clickbait stuff that CNET puts out. They've embraced AI written articles, I think, in a number of cases, but this appears to be a real study that they did, and YouGov survey, and found that U.S. adults paying for home internet saw their internet prices increase last year. On average, they paid $195 more last year than they did the year before. When I saw that, obviously that wasn't an increase. What that was the number of people that saw their promo run out, and then they got kicked into the standard fee that Doug was noticing. So in the article, it talked about how a lot of people react to that by then switching. And so it's interesting to me that, like, if we see Comcast reduce its churn and its ARPU goes down, and Wall Street only measures them by the ARPU, then that is foolish, because reducing their churn will significantly increase their profits, I would think.
Yeah. Now, everybody almost across, I've been tracing the prices of all the big guys for a decade. And so in the last 2 years, everybody's raised their rates almost. I mean, DSL has gone up across the board for the big guys very quietly, $10 or $15. A lot of people are still stuck with that as their only option. You know, Comcast and Charter's raise their rates every year. The FWA cellular guys have snuck their rates up. You know, Starlink raised their rates. There is rate increases all across the board, and they're not insubstantial. They're not as big as the $195, because that's crazy. That is the promotions running out.
I'm going to bring on someone from US Telecom and CTIA to set you all straight, because their prices are going down if you squint your eyes hard enough and hold your breath long enough.
Every year that's gone down for 7 or 8 years in a row. I think it's amazing. Yes, substantially. Last year, I think they went down 30%. I think they said so.
Huh? I was just go ahead, Travis.
Who is this?
The U.S. Telecom, which is the lobbying arm for the giant companies.
Oh, okay.
Travis, they do the same thing. They do the same thing that the cable companies used to do, where they're basically like, we added 10 channels that no one watches, and we raised your rates, and your price per channel is now lower than it was before.
Right.
Well, the brightest bulb I've ever met in this industry told me one time, internet access will be $100 a month before you know it. And I believe him. So.
Now, and who was that? Who was that, Travis?
I don't like, he gets kind of, pretty proud and kind of cocky if I toot him real well, but he's wearing a black t-shirt and Grateful Dead. So, you'll have to kind of figure that one out.
Now, there was something that I saw, and I want to figure out if we can try and replicate this with the sort of the local providers that do a good job. But my boss actually was telling me that they had seen a study that someone had done regarding investor-owned electricity rates. And it had said, like, over some recent period of time, the investor-owned electricity, like the big companies, they have raised their rates at a speed that is, I believe, on the order of like 50% more than inflation. Whereas the small municipal providers and others have kept their rates rising at a rate that is 50% lower than inflation. And I feel like we could see the same thing among providers, whether that's like UTOPIA and all the great municipal providers, but then also I suspect it would be true of many of the small private companies as well.
Oh, the small guys that I know, I mean, it's an act of God to get them to change their rates. I mean, once they set rates, they keep them for 5-10 years. So yeah, I mean, they don't even like to talk about it.
They got to figure out who has the keys to the internet website so they can change it.
Right. I mean, Travis is an example. They just don't raise their rates. Yeah. When's the last time you raised your rates, Travis?
A couple of years back. But here's the problem. Let's forget it's internet access. Let's just say we're running Chris Mitchell Coffee Shop, and we've got 10 employees, right?
Another thing I don't drink.
Yep. And every year there's going to be a 5% merit increase. There's going to be, your insurance is going to go up 8 to 10% a year. Your rent is going to go up. Everything's going up. How do we keep charging the same for that cup of coffee year over year, and then expect us to stay in business? That's
my point. Like, everything in America has gone up.
That's what I'm getting at. Y'all are ignoring me. Like, I mean, I feel like Kim, you're raising a good point, but my answer to that is that the rate of increase matters. And to Travis's point, not everything is getting more expensive. Your backhaul is getting cheaper. Your cost per bit is going down. Your ability to like serve people, with scale is not increasing linearly. It is increasing at a smaller amount per sub that you bring on. And so that's not to say that you can lower your rates necessarily. Now, do I think Chattanooga and Longmont, where they have more or less finished building out. And if as long as they don't expand to their neighbors, then once they pay off their debt, they suddenly have a lot more money because they're not expanding. They could lower their rates. But Travis, I agree with you that as long as anyone's expanding, then they have that pressure and they're not going to be able to lower their rates. But the rate of increase matters.
But you also
I'm sorry, Kim, was somebody talking?
Well, you
I don't even know.
When their debt was,
yes.
A lot of these things, these are 10, 15, 20 years out from now. And, and then now you're going to have a whole new CapEx cycle. You're going to have to go through and refresh all your electronics, some of your fiber, I'm just saying it's a very expensive business to run. So to think that you're going to keep your prices locked in at, 1955's pricing, I just don't see it. Every year it's going to be a steady increase all the way to $100.
It's so much variability in this industry right now. Like if you're building a network and then you're, like you said, Travis, trying to sustain it for 20 years, I would put some cushion in there too, just to make sure I have enough reserves if something goes haywire in this really weird time we're having. So, I mean, I understand the point, but I actually am okay with the price increases right now. And I know that's shocking to everyone, but I'm actually okay with them.
Well, geez, health insurance alone is a couple bucks a year per sub, increase.
We've talked about before, we're all against these low $15, $20, $30 rates forced on ISPs. They don't make any sense and they're not sustainable. So, yeah.
Well, I think there again, it depends on the size of the entity. I think that you could tell Comcast that it has to serve 15-20% of its territory with a low cost option, and because they've already built out all the cable modems and everything else, they could probably do it without any kind of hit that Wall Street would even notice on the bottom line. But if we're talking about smaller providers, especially those that are growing, then 100%. But I think the scale really matters in that question. I feel like Doug is like trying to decide if he wants to prolong the topic and argue or not.
Nah. I already forget what the topic was.
I did want to say the last thing about CNET that I think is interesting was the price hikes didn't necessarily translate to better service. More than half of the people who saw their bills increase said they still experienced unreliability. I think this continues to be a growing story. Comcast service, very good in my neighborhood. Friends of mine in other parts of the city, I should say acquaintances, since earlier I said I don't have any friends really. Where you are matters. The local network, there's a lot of problems with the coax system still. So you can still have a lot of reliability issues in different places. Trav?
But also don't forget you have a fiber provider there. So all of the heavy users, I would guarantee you 80% of them are on the fiber plant, which leaves the coax plant for the casual users, which then have a very good experience.
Yeah, no, that's also a good point.
Yeah.
My firm, we do surveys. Reliability has been the issue for the last 10 years. It's not, they're not unhappy with their speeds. They're not all that unhappy anymore with customer service, but they're really unhappy with reliability. And people define reliability as it goes out 3 times a day for 2 minutes, or it goes out, half a day a month, and it just drives people up the wall.
There's a family that we talked to in Ammon, Idaho, and they were so excited about the municipal fiber network because they were stuck on, I want to say Cablevision or Suddenlink. I forget which. We've heard so many horror stories about both. And every Saturday morning, their kids would wake them up early because they had to reset the cable modem because it was always off. And like when Ammon Fiber came and they were able to hook up, they were just like, oh, we can sleep in on the weekends. Like it was every weekend they were getting woken up early.
Chris, we have to remind Chris he's getting old. Hookup has a different meaning now.
Yeah.
I think I'm the youngest person on this little podcast, and I even knew that, Chris. So keep going.
Doug, you're spot on. I still recall we had a 10-minute outage a year ago at 3 a.m. in the morning. People had T-shirts made saying they survived the great USI outage of 2024. It was
Seriously.
3 in the morning. Yeah.
So I'll say back in the day, and not to drag this show too low, I created a website when I was in college, and we called it MacHookup.org. Mac hookup orgy. So I get the lingo. I just never got to participate. So, those are the challenges.
Where is this show going?
I don't know, but hey, we really need Rye to be doing some bleeping here.
If you give me an opportunity at wordplay, there's no coming back when I get a chance to do some wordplay. And that was one. Nobody even got it. I had to keep explaining it to people. And maybe that's why I didn't get a date off it. I don't know. UTOPIA Fiber is crushing it, Kim. What is happening there? I know that, and we're joking, but most of this growth took place while you were there. I expect next year's numbers will be devastating.
It really is because I left. That all of the 11,000 sales or whatever they have clocked in for 2024 were because I left on November 22nd of 2024. But no, it looks like they were doing really well, and I think they are really just showing the power of consistency in delivering and all of the things that Travis was just talking about. That they're going to continue to grow. So kudos to that team over there. They are doing some amazing things.
And specifically, they added 11,256 new subscribers. They have more than 70,000 subscribers, more than half of whom joined the network in just the past 3 or 4 years. I just like to remind people, and I'm sure there's a ton of people joining UTOPIA that aren't even aware of the past controversy and frustration.
Absolutely. I think when I first was working over there, that it was pretty evident everybody knew about UTOPIA. A lot of people, even when I casually say where I used to work, people will be like, I've never heard of it, or they've only heard good things. So I think this goes back to just that's where ISPs win or lose, is consistency and delivering on their promises. And the UTOPIA staff over there has done a really great job for the past 15 years of doing that.
Now, Doug,
I would bet that 15 or 20% of UTOPIA's customers have no idea they're municipal based.
Absolutely.
They don't pay attention.
Most people don't. Yeah. Right. No, unless and then it gets confusing because people put stuff in the paper or whatever, and people don't understand the backstory. It's like starting a movie halfway through and you don't even understand what they're talking about. And I think that happens not with UTOPIA, but a lot of ISPs out there that get caught up in that. That's why I think even the big guys get caught up in sins of 20 years ago or 10 years ago that they are trying to overcome as well. And people sometimes have a long memory.
Kim, I'm curious if you had any reaction to this new law that is trying to discourage municipal broadband in Utah. Apparently they found new ways to create some barriers. Sounds like it's not a big deal.
I don't think it's a big deal at all. And I think as a Utah resident, what it's basically saying is that they want, before a municipality can build out a network, that they have to do their due diligence, that they have to get like the voter support, that they have to have all of these measures in place and more transparency. And I never think that's a bad thing in this role. If the government is going to get involved in this space, I think they do owe it to the taxpayers to be very upfront with where money is going to go. So although the headlines of it are bad, I actually think it's protecting the rights of the people and giving the people a voice of what they want in their community.
Doug, have you looked into this at all?
Looked into
the restrictions in Utah that just passed?
Yeah, I think they're not going to stop anything. So I'm not sure why they did it. If it doesn't slow UTOPIA down, who would it slow down? Are there any new cities thinking who are outside UTOPIA? Did you know?
I think there are a lot of cities. I think it's more, I don't think it's aimed at UTOPIA if it was me. You do see some of these other cities that have bonded and done it on their own, which is Lehigh and some other cities around here have looked into it. I think it's more probably, if anything, trying to discourage people, put barriers up from discouraging more communities to go down that path.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before, where I think there's a dynamic in that the Utah Taxpayers Association, the big telecom companies, they have departments that lobby, and they don't always have a big bill to push, and they need to figure out something, and so they work on something, or it's part of a larger campaign where they'll try and be more aggressive in future years or something like that. But I agree with Kim. We've studied some of the cities that have not studied the situation properly, got in over their heads, and got into problems. And we think that's a real problem. I'm not always sure that these state laws help. Honestly, I think these are to create a barrier. And but we always, I think Jim Baller, a real mentor of mine, always made it clear that like we're not just about municipal number go up of municipal networks. We are interested in cities being well served by having great internet access, and to do that, it's not just a matter of making an investment, but making the smart investment and doing it in a good way, making sure you keep Doug far away from your plan.
Yeah. Now, one of the biggest failures municipal was in Utah was Provo. They just tanked. But in the end, it turned out well because they have a fiber network.
No, but the thing that drives me nuts about this is that, like, when you go back, right, Spanish Fork, right before Provo builds, Spanish Fork is like, we're going to do a municipal network. And at that point, HFC cable in the late 90s. And Provo was like us too. And they were studying it at roughly the same time. Provo was bigger and had to take a little bit more time. And so Spanish Fork moved ahead. The legislature cut them off at the knees and said no more municipal networks with a retail model. And Provo tried to move ahead with this other business model that they did not want to use. Spanish Fork is like 80% of the market. Spanish Fork like has millions of dollars that go into the general fund with excess revenue from the network that they run. That's great. And so what drives me nuts about Utah is that like this law, they're always like, it's supposed to protect. No, it's not. It's protecting Comcast and Quest or CenturyLink, Lumen, blah, blah, blah. That's what it's protecting. Like it forced Provo to use a risky model.
He just said, Kim, that open access is a bad model. Just so you
I know. Look at him.
100%. I did not.
It
was a bad model for Provo.
I'm going to disagree with you. Like, I think that communities get into this with thinking that they can do it. And I don't think it's a bad thing to get more like feasibility studies and these things in place so you don't have lawmakers who come in and just make decisions without the community support, right?
Kim goes into consulting and suddenly we need more feasibility studies, Travis. Where have we heard this before?
Nobody's looking at my feasibility studies at all. But what I am saying is, why is it bad to put a little bit of barriers in order to make financially sound decisions
Kim,
for cities?
You and I are on the same page. These barriers from the year of our Lord 2025, reasonable. I'm not going to argue about those. The barriers from 2003, 2002, whenever those were, terrible. Those are the ones that forced Provo to lose, depending on how you want to account for it. Now, on top of it, Provo built a network. And Travis, give me your honest reaction to this. City builds a network. Provo's a good sized city, connects more than 100 department locations, like water utility, all that sort of stuff. Provo's fiber network does not charge the city departments for service. Is that a good plan or not?
How much should they pay to put the network in?
On the order of tens of millions, probably like 30 million, I would guess at the time of $2005. I don't know, somewhere around there.
I think it was 90 million. Yeah.
Was it that much?
90 million. You know how many passings they got, Doug?
Oh, it's 100,000. It's big city.
Well, the problem is I don't think they finished all the passings. Like there were still areas.
No, they didn't quite finish it, but they built most of it. Yeah,
it's a hard question to answer, but I mean, fundamentally, if there's a dark fiber network there that the municipality is using for their day-to-day business, 911 cameras, et cetera, I just don't know how it's financially structured. But
my question is do you think a city should connect a bunch of city departments and not charge them for it?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, because it's really hard to operate a network without anything coming in. But did you read Roger's report about Utopia? It was very interesting, where he indicated that his
I think this is what we call a press release. I think this is what we call press
travel and entertainment and hotel expense has gone down, like to the point that the business is profitable now. I don't know. Do we know what happened? Yeah.
It was like November 22nd.
Yeah, it was somewhere around there. And Roger was talking about how profitable the business is now, and
I did notice, Travis, that Delta revised their earnings expectations.
Yeah. So I don't know what happened.
I haven't been into a hotel room in a while, guys. Look at me. I'm in my office.
All right. We are going to bring on Shane Eleniak, who is the chief of product at Calix. Shane, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here.
I hope, Shane, you can see by joining us that we have a lot of fun on this show. So join right in.
I was listening backstage for about 10 minutes. You guys have a great show.
And
I
Shane, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry that they convinced you to come onto
no,
the
Shane,
show.
I will treat Shane with respect. Dave Russell was a mentor of mine. And in fact, next week we are going down, Rye and I are going down, and we're going to meet Kim at CBAN, the Community Broadband Actions Network event, which is the successor. It's a successor. It came after the IAMU, Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities Spring Conference. And I learned so much about this industry from riding down to that show with Dave Russell, who was a great salesman at OSI before moving to Calix, was a great person at Calix. And so I just have tremendous fondness for a lot of the folks there that I've met over the years.
There's a lot of good people at Calix. We've been at this problem for a while.
Yes. So I wanted to say before we hand it over to you, Shane, for people that are not as technical, tune in and if you're a little bit confused by things, skip over those and just focus on the other parts that you might get better. But originally, when there was fiber networks, there's different ways of building them. Travis famously uses Ethernet over fiber, but most of the networks are built using what's called passive optical networks, and Calix provides the gear, one of the vendors in this space that provides gear. A lot of smaller shops use Calix. We are transitioning from GPON networks, gigabit passive optical, to XGS PON, and we'll talk about that a little bit maybe, but we're really going to be talking about what comes even next down the road and some of the cool stuff that Calix is doing. In part because, I mean, this is where I think Shane being the head of product, what's interesting to me is if you're a company that is focused on a big company, then they kind of might be setting the tone of what services they want to provide over the network. But because Calix works with so many companies, Calix actually provides kind of white label services that then they can use. And I think that's pretty cool. So we'll talk about that a bit. So Shane, what is top of mind right now for you as we ease into this?
I think a couple of different things. So, one of the common messages we tell all of our service providers is it's not about speed. It's about experience, right? And I think you guys touched a little bit on it's consistent experience and quality of experience. And there's a lot of things subscribers value. And, I'm a big believer. Speed's kind of a little bit like your car. If it doesn't go fast enough that you can drive on the freeways, you're really unhappy. Once you're going fast enough, it stops becoming about speed and its experience, right? So I'm pretty happy because I feel like we're getting to a really nice place technology-wise, right? If you think about Wi-Fi 7, you think about XGS PON, you think about 100 gig E and 400 gig E rings. We're not, there's historically, and I've been doing this for about 35 years, we've always had choke points. Yeah, but this part of I'm starting to feel like we're not seeing choke points. And now a lot of the discussion we're having when it's what's next is really about collapsing and virtualizing and slicing. Slicing becomes the big thing that says, can I use the same network for residential, for backhaul, for cell towers, for business services? How do I get more out of these networks? And how do I stop running 2 or 3 or 4 different networks, right? And I think that's where the technology, when we start talking about 50 gig PON and those types of things, and we start talking about Wi-Fi 8 and those things, it's really more about slicing than it is, okay, but residential, am I going to run into a speed problem? And the answer is no, honestly. Like if you're running a 10 gig network, speed's not your issue. You've got to look at experience and call times and truck rolls and automation, and what's the quality of experience that your subscribers are getting, and how are your installs? But I'm excited about bringing all of these different divergent networks together that says, okay, how do I get better returns on that fiber plant I put in the ground? What are our different monetary streams I can start to leverage?
Mm-hmm.
How do I stop managing 3 or 4 different networks, right? But when I look at what's possible with XGS right now, I'm not worried that says, well, you're kind of seeing 2 things. First, XGS services kind of went in the ground 2016. You started to see a crossover where it was kind of 51% XGS versus, 49% GPON a couple of years ago. And now we're thinking probably within, 26, 27, we'll see the crossover. And if you look at the economics now in XGS, you really, if you're going to spend $1 on a new plant, you're probably going to go XGS PON just because of the economics. The economics have crossed over. We think we're talking to our customers, like we've got a lot of customers that are on GPON networks. We think you're probably going to, if you're doing a 1 gig service plan, 35, 36, you got to start thinking about what's next. But you're probably good on a GPON plant for another 10 years. You're probably good on, now if you're thinking you're going into more of a 5 gig or an 8 gig type of service plan and you're sitting on XGS, then you're probably thinking the same type of thing. And about 2035, 36, 37, I better have a plan.
Right.
Now, it's all about investment protection. We're excited. We'll probably start to see first adoption next year on 50 gig, but that's, I think we've got coexistence right again, which says, okay, you can do GPON, you can do XGS PON, you can do 50 gig PON on the same plant, which says the first customers that are going to buy 50 gig line cards are going to run XGS services. I'm not expecting a lot of 10 gig or 25 gig type of services running on these. I think you'll start to see them for things like, okay, I'm doing Wi-Fi 7 access backhaul, or I'm selling backhaul services for 5 gig towers and those types of things, or I'm starting to look at how do I bring higher bandwidth services for business services, business parks. But a lot of the discussion we're having with our customers is really more around coverage. Have you got strategy around public safety, EMS, Edge of Rome, those types of things? What are you doing for Main Street USA for coverage and those types of things? And are you building smart towns, right? And are you thinking more around all of your subscribers, right? Everything from rural up through.
Right. Well, let me jump in there, Shane, because I think one of the things that people should be aware of is, as you're talking about running multiple networks, is that what I've seen a little bit, and everyone else actually on this call knows more about this than I do, but I'm the host, is that when you're building a network, you might be building out like one technology suite, like a GPON, for instance, to connect residents. And then for businesses, you might be planning on point-to-point services, which is effectively a different network. You're saying that as we move forward, you can imagine that you basically have one network topology, one set of like tech that you're using more or less, and every endpoint is on that, and you can manage them rather than having to keep them separate because there's different technologies or different like quality of service associated with each technology.
Yeah, we're starting to get to the point where you can do this endpoint, this SLA, this quality of service, and you're really managing the facilities, right? And whether that's airtime through Wi-Fi, and where we're headed in those technologies, whether it's this slice of bandwidth that says, okay, I've got a 50 gig capacity service, but I'm slicing this out for residential, this out for backhaul, this out for public safety, this out for, and I'm starting to get to the point that I can associate all the way from network slicing in the IETF and what I can do from segment-based routing to get to content. I've got control over my access and aggregation network, all the way down to, if you look at what's going on in the cellular world, what's going on in the Wi-Fi world, that I can manage airtime and spectrum and allocate that to end devices, right? And you can start getting deterministic, and I can start to prescribe and manage virtual networks. And, that's kind of, we've been talking about this for 20 some years as an industry, and the technology is finally getting to the point where you can say, okay, we can do this. Mm-hmm. And the operational systems are there to take advantage of it, to make it possible to provision and operate without having to take on huge back office work, right? And
let me ask you, Travis, Mr. Home Run Ethernet guy, also said you're curious about PON recently, or you're using it as a solution in an area. Do you have any questions or thoughts on this discussion?
Well, I think it's interesting because fundamentally the reason we went with an Active E solution was for exactly what Shane's talking about. There was a potential contention point at the at the final access layer. But XGS PON actually has been proving out to be a pretty solid technology. There's enough capacity to do it right. And now with the 50 gig what are they calling it? 50 gig PON, I guess.
50 gig PON. Yeah.
And now with the triple lasers, the triple waves, I mean, it's pretty compelling, And I think now we're going to get into a lot of kind of more engineering conversations where you just make sure you have enough light budget to do it correctly, right?
Yeah. And probably about 20% of our customers are active Ethernet customers, right? OSI was we've got a long history of doing kind of active Ethernet as well as PON, and I'm excited because the technologies are kind of getting to an interesting point, right? The problems we were trying to solve with point-to-point were different than what we were trying to do on economics, point-to-multipoint, and we're going to get to a point where we can build point-to-point networks on point-to-multipoint topology fiber, right? And we've all been trying to figure out how to do that for 20 some years, right? 25 years.
I don't know if all of us have. Kim?
Well, most of the people in the industry, like people who were trying to build networks early 2000s, right? Like we're grappling with these problems going, I like the point to multi-point economics, but I'm worried about point-to-point SLA and contention, and how do I do this? So the answer was, well, you got to go build both, or you pick one or the other. And a lot of what drove active Ethernet and those types of models was limitations in technology, honestly, right? That says if architecture is a series of compromises, right? And I'm getting excited because we're getting fewer and fewer compromises, right? Where the technology is catching up.
So Shane, is it true or not true that in the XGS PON spec, it's kind of open from the vendor standpoint? Can you take one vendor's ONT and drive it from another vendor's OLT, or is that not true?
You can. A lot of work also in parallel went into Open OMCI, and a lot more thought has gone into Open OMCI these last few years. And I feel like between NetConf Yang, BBF models, Open OMCI, the standards are catching up to the point that says, okay, I can build these networks, I can operate these networks, and I've got enough standardization that I'm not stuck into a particular ecosystem, right?
Yeah, and that's big. I think it's a big move forward for the industry.
Absolutely.
Not so great for the vendors, but it's great for the industry. So,
I'm a big believer if you're creating value for your customers, standards aren't your problem, right? Like if you're trying to use closed standards to protect, then do you really have the value, right?
I don't disagree.
Well, one thing that you talked about, Shane, has a massive improvement over the old days, because I had a bunch of clients on the original OSI stuff, and their BPON guys were all promised they would get a seamless upgrade to GPON, and they did not. And they had to literally throw it all away and build from absolute scratch. And since then, you've gotten it right. And so now there are people now with GPON, XGS PON, and they can probably put your 50 GPON in. And that's a gigantic improvement, because boy, that was a big shock to the guys who it didn't work for.
BPON to GPON was painful.
It was very painful, because they're going, look, I need more bandwidth, and the only way to get there is to rip it out. And it was just
we ended up building a lot of auto sensing that says, oh, I can sense whether it's BPON, I can sense whether it's GPON. We tried to make that painless. Since then, as an industry, we've kind of learned to get the coexistence right on the wavelength plans, right? And GPON to XGS PON has been really seamless.
It's been pretty seamless, yeah.
Pretty seamless, and the technology is great. The coexistence elements, the NPM optics, the Combi PON got a lot of people who are doing it, and across vendors. It's not like, oh, but this one vendor had to go do a bunch of magic to figure it out, right? So I think as an ecosystem, we're learning. It's operational costs. I started my career at TELUS. 2/3 of your costs are OpEx, not CapEx, right? And it's taken the industry a really long time to kind of wrap their arms around the fact that, you got to think about operational costs. You can't just look at the tech and the capital cost out of the gate, right?
But like, okay, I hear what we're all saying, but I mean, is the reason we're seeing the uptick in this is just because you're seeing not many people make active equipment anymore, and it's almost forcing everybody into this model? Or do we really think that it's because of all the cost structures or whatnot? Because I mean, we saw that DZS or Zone, if they're called Zone again, you went bankrupt, and they provided a lot of active equipment. And who like is that what's forcing this, or do you think is where the market's going to XGS PON is forcing some of these closures?
I think it's just topology and costs. Point to multi-point topologies, it's circulatory system. Point to multi-point technologies lend themselves well to the access network. Point to point lends itself well to the metro and core, just based on topology of what you're trying to build. Access is an access to aggregation game. It tends to be point to multi-point as opposed to building meshes and partial meshes, right? Whereas if you look at the topology you're trying to build in your metro CDN, you want a mesh or a partial mesh, which lends itself to point-to-point based technologies, whether you build them on a virtual ring or not. You're doing point-to-point connectivity between endpoints for redundancy and recovery, right? I think you're just dealing with an access aggregation network, no different than any other type of distribution network, right?
Well, and I think the answer to Kim's question goes back a decade, Kim, because the companies who were left doing point-to-point were not the companies who were pouring money into R&D. So there's been almost no R&D in active Ethernet for a decade. All the R&D went into the PON side. If they would have done R&D there, they might have, be the same place. But the companies who were left doing that are not the kind of companies who are innovative. So,
but all the innovation,
we saw this coming a decade ago. I mean,
all the innovation I'm doing on point-to-point, it's all in the aggregation network, right?
Right.
It's the move from 10 gig E to 100 gig E to 400 gig E, right? So, but I'm doing it on the uplink side of my cards, not on the distribution side of it, right? And it's just different technology to solve the different problems, right? Like we're still doing point-to-point innovation and investment, but it's all in aggregation and metro, right?
I want to give Travis a chance to answer the question, ask the question he was going to answer, and then I want to go to services after that.
Yeah, no, maybe this is the conspiracy theorist to me, but most of the operators are venture capital backed, and venture capital is all about passings, and it is substantially cheaper to do PON passings than it is to do active E passings. The cost of fiber, the lack of needing central offices versus cabinets, just a bunch of things. So when your bank is saying passings, yeah, you got to get a good a technology that can get you those maximum passings. So that's the conspiracy person in me.
I think we're finally getting the
we needed a good conspiracy theory here. We did not have one.
Chris has been letting us down with his conspiracy theories lately, so
really
Travis had to pick it up.
But in fairness, XGS PON it's solid. I wasn't a huge GPON fan, but I'm an XGS PON fan.
Yeah, no, I'm a big
because there's enough capacity there.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we didn't build next generation Active E. It just the XGS is solid, and we thought we could get to the cost points we wanted to get to. The economics make a ton of sense, right?
Well, this is for me I've not able to follow everything that you guys were talking about. But what I find interesting is one of the things that I learned from a different mentor, a guy who goes way back to the arguments in the 80s and basically elegant approaches to telecom versus brute force. I might summarize as, and looking at where the market lands, where the millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of units move. That's the technology that moves regardless of how elegant it is. And I sometimes feel like this show might attract more people who are more technical and they're confused by this, but that's where that's why Microsoft won, right? I mean, it wasn't about elegance. It was about
won, it's why Ethernet won. It's why IP won, right?
Right.
We can have all the debates on why aren't we building SONET ATM world anymore, right? And it's just economics ultimately wins, right? And that, good enough wins. There's a reason we're not building token ring networks, and been spent the first 10 years of my career at TELUS doing those economics and doing those topologies, and economics ultimately always wins if you can deliver the right experience, the right services at the right reliability, right? Your operational costs, it's a combination of your CapEx costs and your operational costs, right?
I'm gonna just throw a couple of comments up. I wanna kind of move to services, so I'm not gonna engage with them. I mean, if someone else wants to respond to them later on, they can feel free. I appreciate them, but I want to ask about services, and that's sort of what I'm interested in the work that we do at the tribal broadband boot camps is the way in which we're talking here not even like a small municipal ISP that has 7,000 subscribers, but a tribe that has 500 members, and trying to figure out what they can do, and the ability to use Bark, for instance, the tool that you all have available to help make sure that like kids aren't doing inappropriate things. And I'm not talking about even like, I don't want my kid to see graphic content. It's even like suicidal ideation and things like that are tremendously
cyberbullying and, all kind of getting to, my belief right now, modern pyramid of needs is connectivity, security, elimination of complexity, and then, analytics. What am I doing with it? What value am I getting? But to me, the whole secure connectivity, right? And security is both the cyber side of it, but it's also some of the ugly realities of social media and things, right? And how do you bring that to your members? How do you bring that to your subscribers in a way that they can feel safe, right? And it's, it's everything from explicit content and that, but more importantly, it's cyberbullying, it's suicidal thoughts, it's those types of things. And that's kind of the, what we look at from a managed services basis on, do we have those, it's identity protection, it's dark web monitoring, it's a lot of just some of the dark side of the realities of being in a hyper-connected world, right?
Now, is this something where is this like a push and pull where your customers are like, what I really need is this, or you're sitting there in the office trying to figure out like where the gaps are? Like how exactly does this work, particularly as we look to the next set of services that you're tinkering with? Yeah.
So we see ourselves as we've got 1,600 customers, everything from, very small, municipalities, tribes, member co-ops, we've got 500 people to, large operators like Verizon and everything in between, right? And we do a lot of customer advisory board. I'm a big lean fan, listen to your customers about what are the pain points they have, and then go get smart people on whiteboards to figure out the how, right? How do we best do that? But our best ideas come from really understanding the day-to-day of our operators. And that's one of the value of having very small to very large, is you get a really nice cross-section of North America going, where are the consistent pain points? Where's the consistent value? How are we, and we see our service providers as partners, right? We see ourselves as a B2B2C company that they need to be successful. If they're successful, then we'll be successful.
Well, actually, let me ask one more question, and then I'll want to see if anyone else wants anything they want to bring up. But Shane, earlier, Travis was making the point, the costs are going up, right? Whether for a variety of different reasons, including, and I mean, I say this for friends of mine on the left, the fact that everyone wants a raise every year, right? And so like costs are going up for everything. What are you guys doing to reduce OpEx? Because again, when I look at tribes that will never have enough people to fully generate the revenue to run a nice, comfortable shop, what are you doing to cut their operational costs?
We're trying to go at it in two different ways. First one, obviously, green sustainability power costs, right? That's a hard OpEx cost for an operator. My second largest bill I used to pay beyond people was power, right? When I was a service provider. What can we do to keep driving that? And then the second one's all about automations and workflows, right? That says, how do we make it easy to bring actionable insights, and whether that's for the marketing persona, the operations, the support persona, to make them more efficient, right? And because the problem everybody has is it's a target-rich world. There's too much to do every day, right? And how do you streamline that? So, because many of these organizations are trying to run on very, very thin workforces, right? And it's hard to hire. It's hard to get quality people. It's hard to, and it's expensive, right? So it's how do we give them the tools and the frameworks to be efficient, right? And what do they do so that it's high value activities, right? And whether that's call avoidance and avoiding truck rolls, whether that's streamlining life cycle of systems and services for operations, how we handle health and networking and quality experience, or whether it's how do you make it efficient to communicate with your members, right? That says, here's what we're doing. We're aware there's a problem. We're fixing it, right?
Last round of questions. Travis, you want to lead?
So true or not true, you can run PON, XGS PON, and 50 gig PON all across the same fiber?
Yeah, option 3, what we're real excited about for the wavelength plan, allows all 3 of those to coexist.
What I found interesting is the uplink, though, for XGS and 50 gigs seem to share the same spectrum. Is that true?
No, there's enough separation between them
There is.
Because there was option 1, option 2, where they kind of conflict, and there's a brand new option 3 that just got ratified a few months ago, and so we're big fans of option 3.
Okay. That was just confusing in the spec. So that's that. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And then the next after 50 is it 100?
It's going to be at least 100. Where we run into is if you don't increase by about at least a factor of 4 or 5, it really becomes hard on the economics to say, but why am I buying this next one? You kind of need the by 4 economic. If Ethernet's by 10, PON is basically by 4. So it's probably 200, honestly.
And are you envisioning it being like a quad optic at that point?
We're envisioning quad optic. We're envisioning coherent receiving and those types of technologies.
Oh, nice.
Travis, we're going to have to switch
Cable
to
Labs is working on a 100 gig option.
What's that?
But that Cable Labs is working on a 100 gig option.
We're spending a lot of time with Cable Labs.
That would be their first product. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they want to go from 10 to 100, kind of follow the Ethernet map. And there's a number of people that want to go 10, 50, 200. So we'll see if we can get those two worlds to agree, because we're kind of working on both sides of that and hoping we can get to a single spec. The industry always does better if we can get to a single standard than try and jump around on. If we have competing approaches, you never get the economies of scale, right?
Unfortunately, Cable Labs never really compromises with anybody else.
I've been in that world. I was at CommScope as far as Calix. I know that world well. I'm hoping we can get to a compromise, but we'll see.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Travis, you and I need to switch to vegetable platters rather than wings if we're going to be sticking around that long to see that need.
I mean, 50 gig on a 32 split, I'll be retired before that's a capacity issue. So I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Kim, last question.
No, I just like that we talk all these numbers on here, but I guess I do have a question. Where do you think that we are going to see, because Calix really focuses on the customer experience, right? And what you do. Do you think you're going to have more competitors in this space who are more focused on the customer experience from the ONT side of the business, or do you think that's going to pivot? I'm asking you a hard question there, Mr. Shane, on this front.
I think we will see more. I think we will see fewer competitors who are focused on customer experience. So
That's
I think in general the numbers will be less, but I think everybody is recognizing that going forward, the big problems to solve are customer experience.
That's an interesting perspective, because I think that you're going to see people who don't look at the customer experience, their take rates aren't going to be the same, and then they pivot back to the customer experience. But yeah,
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Doug?
No more questions. Pretty good.
All right.
Good discussion. Yep.
Shane, thank you for coming on and sharing us all that information and helping Travis figure out his next investment.
I really appreciate the opportunity. You guys have a great show.
Well, unfortunately, what you've probably done is made really confusing for Chris to buy his next stock. So that's
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
So I'm going to buy stock in just lasers, because I remember when Travis was talking about the triple laser, I would just flash back to, was it Saturday Night Live like 40 years ago when they were joking about the 5-bladed razor? And obviously the quad laser is just the, we're going to be heading to the Cinco laser before too long. So I'm getting laser stock. That's a thing, right?
Yeah. Go ahead and buy it. Yeah, LASR. You go buy it all, Chris.
Thank you, Shane.
Thanks.
Take care. I did just throw a link to the show to Matt Larson in case he wanted to pop in for this last thing that I really wanted to talk about. So Matt, I've seen your email, and hopefully it will work if you're still listening.
We can't invite Matt on. He's seen my dance moves in person now. Like, it was better when it was via Connect This. But go ahead.
Here's my question, which is, if the Trump administration changes BEAD significantly, which is something I think a number of the WISPs would like to see, I just don't see how it actually goes to terrestrial wireless when, I mean, the argument, which I think is totally inaccurate and economically illiterate and financially ruinous, the argument that like it is cheaper to just pay for satellite than a terrestrial fiber network. I got to think that like if you're going to wireless, the satellite is going to crush terrestrial wireless from this very flawed methodology that BEAD NTIA is likely to use. And so, Doug, I don't know if you've thought about that at all.
I don't think that's automatic. I think there's certainly a good chance that if all they do is lower the cost per passing to eliminate some of the more expensive fiber places, and that's all they do, then fixed wireless will fit under there very well. The states are going to want to use all their money. They're not going to want to put it all in satellite. They're going to want to build as much fast broadband as they can. And it sounds like everyone's hoping that's the option they're going to have, in which case, if states can make the decision, then they will go with fixed wireless. But it's going to be a state-by-state thing. I mean, but I don't think it'll eliminate them
why do you
at all.
think that states will pick fixed wireless? I mean, just because of the cost?
Because that will be the only option left on the table, is what Doug is saying.
No. If they cut down on the amount of fiber, and there's a whole lot of folks who can now build 500 megabit and gigabit fixed wireless networks, that's a pretty good option. So I think they're going to go with those. It's certainly a lot faster than Starlink. So I think
What
they're going to
happens
get
in 5 years,
of
Doug?
wins.
What happens in 5 years? So do they generate enough revenue from that to be able to then pay for upgrade cycles moving forward? And Alan, I think we don't have enough time now. I will send Alan in case he wants to jump in.
That's the real issue, because the new gear is really a heck of a lot more expensive. I mean, the cost per passing all of a sudden is a lot more expensive now than it was. So, yeah, it's not the easiest.
Oh, come on, Charter. You were doing so good for so long. Doug. Looks like he's moving around. We're getting signs of life. Go ahead, Doug. Go and continue.
I don't know what I was saying. I was just saying that, it's the cost for the new fixed wireless stuff is so expensive that it's not as easy of a business plan as it used to be. So,
and that's what I'm just frustrated with, is I do feel like, I mean, I've been trying to talk to folks and getting a better sense of what's really going on. And the thing that I hear is that there's not a lot of respect for Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, and that this decision is not being informed by, for instance, Alan commented WISP means jobs within the state. That's fine, but that's not the analysis that they're using. They're using, we want a smaller number. And it sounds to me like there's a concern that all of the governor's outcries will be ignored by the people who are making this decision. So
I don't know why you would think that, because they're listening to them on every other thing. What are you talking about?
I mean, this is a show that we haven't gotten political yet. I don't think we want to do it right here at the end, but just trying to do a straight analysis of how people make decisions. What I'm hearing is that this is not a matter of them being like, what's the best technology to actually get the job done? It's, we want a smaller number. And that seems to be coming from the top.
That does seem to be coming. We're going to find out soon. We're going to find out. We keep thinking it's 2 weeks away. It never gets here. So,
yeah. Kim, any last thoughts on that, or anything else?
No, I mean, yes, I always say no and then I say yes. I think that a lot of states are going to still use a preference toward fiber, but I think that having the fixed wireless is actually a complementary service, and I think it's a good thing instead of Starlink. So I'm bringing all the controversial opinions here today, Mr. Christopher Mitchell. So, but no, I think it'll be interesting. I mean, but personally, I don't know where BEAD's going to go. I think is it even going to be come out? So is this a mute conversation anyway?
Well, that's everything up in the air.
So basically, I said nothing.
Travis, what I'm done here, should I go play pinball and see if I can beat my John Wick score?
Well, yeah, but did you also see that they're coming out with King Kong, which looks really good? So
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just gonna tail off here on whatever we can figure out. I'm gonna head over to a pinball arcade area. No, Travis, I'm curious, like what your reaction was to the discussion with Shane.
Oh, no, I thought it was cool. I think I'm really intrigued with what Matt brought up a number of episodes about the industrial bank. So how about we take all the BEAD money, put it into an industrial bank, and then
Infrastructure
infrastructure bank, and then we let ISPs borrow against that cheaply and use whatever technology they want to serve their customers.
Yeah, I mean, and John Chambers has talked about vouchers. That would be where people would be able to pick. All of these things have drawbacks because, like, you can't have 3 people picking a fiber network in a county and then like make it work. But
if it's financial, if you can make the math work and you can pay the money back, and the government can make a few % on the dollars.
Mm-hmm. Or if it can't, let's be clear, like this is what drives me a little bit crazy is that, like, if it just breaks even or loses a little bit of money, we are doing much better because we have infrastructure that will support all of the businesses and people of America. Like that is the return, not a percentage of interest rate. Go ahead.
Well, remember when
infrastructure banks have been very successful in Europe, and they barely break even. The whole point is to roll and roll and roll the money.
Yeah.
And so that's the point. So, because I mean, if you're in a startup ISP, you can't afford to pay much interest rate. I mean, let's face it, that's your big hurdle. So that fixes that. So, but
here we have 3 operators on here now, right? We have Matt, and then we have Jay, and we have myself, and
Alan's an operator too.
Oh, okay. So we have 4 of us. So basically, and we all probably have 4 different capital needs to serve our customers, and we might choose 4 different technologies based on the area we're in. I remember when Matt showed us the pictures of where he's at. I mean, he's out in the middle between nowhere and nothing. I mean, his wireless is going to work good for him. In a high dense metro area, I would roll fiber. And this is very different than my opinion a year ago, but it's I think it's the best idea that can solve this problem. Now, I know that one lady will yell at me because there's a lot of good people in BEAD. But, the fact of the matter is we need to use these tax dollars for the most effective. And right now, BEAD's hooked up nothing. And it's pretty sad.
Well, yeah,
I mean, I want to know, who's that?
What's that?
Go ahead, Doug.
Who's the lady? Who's the lady who yells at Travis?
Yeah,
me. It was me. It was me.
Yeah.
I take that honor.
But if Chris wants to lower the costs, then lower our borrowing costs.
Let's hold on though. Like, let's talk about what's really happening here, right? Like, Nevada has a certain amount of money. Thanks, Travis. Has a certain amount of money, and they were going to do 70% fiber passings, and they were going to be shovels in the ground now, right? Montana was all ready to have shovels in the ground this summer to do what Travis's only goal in life at this point is, which is to see someone get hooked up to BEAD. And the Trump administration is just refusing to move forward. The Trump policy seems to be, and this is through, Secretary Lutnick, that it sure seems like they're going to tell Nevada and Montana, hey, no more building this year. You're going to have to wait until next year because you've got 6 months worth of paperwork before we're going to release the money. And then you're not going to be able to do it because you can't build in Montana in December. And so, like, I am touchy, when Travis, you make that point, because, like, this is a program that was designed to connect everyone in the United States. And yeah, it has taken, like 3-4 years at this point, 4 years, but like it took 15 years of electrification to hit 90% of farms. It's not unreasonable to try and figure out. People in freaking Nevada, like, I mean, I've driven Nevada top to bottom. Like it's really hard to figure it out. They were going to build 70% fiber. We were never going to have to make another investment in Nevada. You tell me that they switched to 20% or 30% fiber, that we're not going to need to make another big investment in Nevada. And once again, I'll make a chicken wing bet on that. But I think we're missing out on an opportunity here.
Yeah,
and
how many more
we waited. That's what I'm saying. It would have been built. They would have had shovels in the ground this summer. The Trump administration decided to not release the money, and like it's their decision at this point.
Should have started years ago. Then the switch, because we all know, we've talked about this. It's not every time there's an administrative shift, even at a municipal level, there's going to be a shakeup. So we all knew this was going to happen, right? And so
yeah.
the prior administration should have pushed the gas a little harder to get this thing going.
So I agree, although this program was meant to be the cleanup program for all the other programs in which they got the gas going. And so they did it. And like you all know that for 4 years, I've been criticizing the things that are slowing down. And I still think NTIA should have told the FCC to take a flying, like long walk off a short pier and just gone ahead with whatever data they had, because the FCC is what's totally screwed this up. But even if the FCC hadn't slowed everything down, they still had to wait for states to develop their plans and figure this out. It's a complicated process, but it sure looks like it's working. Arkansas is mostly getting fiber to every home. I don't know that the approach that we favored would have resulted in the end of this decade of every home having fiber in Arkansas, basically. So I don't know. I think at this point, like a lot of the things that we said would not go wrong have not gone wrong. States seem to be doing better, and we were getting to the end, and then they pulled the plug at the last second. So, and I'm not sitting here and say, Travis, now you have to change your mind, but I want people to get both perspectives. So, Doug and Kim.
That was very nearly a rant. We all agree with you, Chris. So we're not.
Yeah, I was just thinking it would be interesting to have Matt on again to get his feedback on this topic too on another show, Mr. Christopher.
Yeah, and Matt said about like in the chat is an option, but it's the least preferred. I agree. Like I have Leo bankrupts. Like Leo is so frustrating because like it solves the question that Travis always brings up, which is a correct question to be a part of the calculation, which is how long do people have to freaking wait for service? But another part of the question is if people are living in this area for the next 10, 20, 30 years, how much are they paying for service? And people are going to be paying on the order of twice as much for low Earth orbit services than they would have for fiber from the kinds of providers that are building it in those areas. And that is just really frustrating. It's lost economic opportunity. It basically means that our federal investment is going much less further. Doug, it looked like you wanted to say something.
No. I got to beat Doug. I just wanted to let you know that you just asked me and Doug if we had any really opinions, and what you really wanted was just to talk more about it.
I always want to talk more. So it's like two angels on my shoulders, and both of them are telling me to talk more. It is a very hard time over here.
I agreed with them, and it didn't turn them off.
Okay, I tried to get you going. It didn't work. You must be in a good mood today. It's coming into the weekend. The sun's out.
Well,
all I can say, Chris, is at this point we still don't really know what NTI is going to do. I think we just got to wait and see. Then we can really complain. But it may not be as bad as we're thinking. So who knows?
I look forward to the show, and we'll call it the complaining show, and that'll be the first time.
Yeah.
But it is ironic though. What is Starlink now? 5 years old, and they've got worldwide coverage. And we're still trying to run a few fiber cables down the street in rural America.
It's the wrong comparison. I don't know. Here's the question. In aggregate, I wonder if we asked who's moving more internet, more packets of data, all of the fiber that's been enabled by the Trump and by the Biden administration or Elon Musk through Starlink. I'd take the fiber that's been built by the Biden administration, even though BEAD hasn't yet gone that far.
No, the other programs have built over $15 billion worth of fiber. Let's not forget all the other grant programs. So yes,
that's what I'm saying. And so Travis BEAD was going to be the last program. That was the mission of it. And so I feel like in some ways, Travis, you keep using the wrong calculus of why it took this long and that sort of a thing. So,
well, I'm just trying to get you going. I don't have an opinion here. So, we're putting fiber in today and hooking people up. So that's all I know. So, but I do enjoy when you get going crazy. So, and you're not taking the bait today.
You know, someday I'm going to figure that out, and it's going to be a sad day because I don't know what we're going to do the following day. Thank you. I think we're going to be back in 2 weeks. We'll see what that looks like, verify it, and put it on social media. But thank you. Thank Calix and Shane. And we look forward to having a complaining episode in the future. Until then, check out Community Broadband Bits next week and have a good one. It's been another fun episode of Connect This.